You're listening to the Flex Success Podcast, where we teach you how to be less shit.
I'm your co-host Lizzy, and this is Dean. We'll be covering all topics relating to health, fitness, and bodybuilding.
Join us as we use our in-the-trenches experience and up-to-date science to provide you with information that you can actually use.
If you like what we do, be sure to give us a like, follow, share, and tag us on social media. The podcast today is a little bit different. You are hearing from Flex Coach Lizzy right now, but I'm not actually part of this episode today. I'm just here to introduce it. So we're going to share with you a chat that Flex Coach Dean had with Flex athlete Taylor about his multiple attempts to get on stage and all the things that went wrong along the way, and how he's only, at the time of this chat, just about to jump on stage. Now, at the time of releasing this, Taylor has actually gotten on stage, and if you want to see how he did and some footage of that, jump onto our backstage videos on YouTube. We did actually release most of this chat in the backstage video on YouTube as well, From Heart Surgery to Stage, it's called. But we wanted to release it on our podcast as well, because we know that our podcast audience are sometimes different to our YouTube audience. And we thought this was a really powerful chat with lots of messages about self-reflection, the lessons that prep can teach you, about resilience, things like that. So let's get going and have a listen to that.
Tell us, man, like what was prep like for you 6 years ago or 7 years ago would have been?
The reason I want to kind of go a little bit further back is because I also, which I've said a million times and people have probably heard, but I tore my ACL when I was 15 years old playing. You know, everybody says it, but I was playing reasonably high level amateur football, Aussie rules, like a state level and whatnot. And you know, you never know what's going to happen with regards to professionalism, but was hoping to, you know, for that to foresee and that to be the future path. And quite very similar to the prep, you know, the second one. Or the second one and the first one with you, where it was kind of just rug pulled out from underneath you immediately, and you know, some pretty harsh conversations with some, you know, recruiters and stuff, where, you know, you are damaged goods regardless. You know, if you've got an ACL tear at 15 and you're not the best, why wouldn't we just take a different version of you, you know, in 2 years' time when you are able to be drafted? And you know, that kind of led me into bodybuilding, because I definitely felt as if it was something by that point I was having to do anyway. And as soon as something becomes something I have to do, I just fall out of love with it. So I was already like in the gym at kind of like 14 and 15, definitely like I'd stay 2 hours after my performance sessions and just be ripping bicep curls and lat pull downs and stuff, and doing an outrageous amount of volume, which did not help with regards to, you know, when I did tear my ACL, you know, there was probably a certain, I was 10 kilos up from like 6 months prior and whatnot. But then, yeah, kind of moved through that rehab, and that rehab transitioned into just purely hypertrophy. Like this went out the window with regards to the ACL management. I just fell in love with the bodybuilding side of things and was kind of not even going to go back to footy. I then went back and played one game in year 12 for the school, and I was 25 kilos heavier than the 12 months prior, and just was the difference in like the athlete, where I was just anaerobically based, like could burst and sprint as a result of the power, but I was so unfit. The skills were poor and I just didn't enjoy it at all. It was just like, oh, this is taking away from my ability to grow muscle. So we fucked that off, and then school kind of wrapped up, or school was wrapping up during that year, and I decided to do a photo shoot at the Arnold Classic, as you do as a 17-year-old, thinking, you know, that was the Arnold Classic where they were having, you know, the amateur competitions, the IFBB there, and I'm standing outside the Melbourne Convention Centre with my shirt off after a 12-week worst mini cut you would have ever done, having pizza on the weekends and stuff like that, no trackable, nothing. Standing there, 78 kilos, dripping wet in front of 110 kilo bodybuilders, thinking, yeah, I'm the shit. Anyway, fell in love with it from there, met that coach through a friend. And from 2017 to 2020 was working with that coach. You know, and it wasn't a great experience in hindsight, but, you know, it is in hindsight. I felt like I was at least being taken care of, but taken care of to the best of that coach's ability for that time. Went through that prep, and I was very excited. Like I'm, you know, blind to what was to come. I think it was a combination of, you know, my expectations were definitely not tempered. It was like, I'm going to be fucking peeled, like regardless of the fact I was 19, 20, 21, and this is going to be easy. that mini cut was easy, and whatnot. And then it just was everything but, to the point in which, again, in hindsight, also, being a coach myself now, and having been done so, for the last kind of 5 or 6 years, just an outrageous amount of unnecessary implementations and things that were being done, I suppose, just to leverage that coach's ego. I remember there's one specific key thing I remember whereby, like, for context for people listening, I was doing, and look, you have to do what you have to do, right? And the fact I did it, I think, is the biggest takeaway for me, in that just I'll do whatever. But I was doing an hour of Stairmaster with a 135 beat per minute target for my pre-workout. This was every day. And I was doing an hour post-workout with 135 beat per minute target. I would then train with volume to the level in which probably took me 3 hours. So there's 5 hours of my day going to that. And I was doing that from 8 weeks out to 2 weeks out where I was injured. My calories were about 1,800 to 1,500, depending on the day, probably averaging around the kind of 17. I was in the low 90s, high 80s. Stimulants were outrageous, things just sitting where they just should never sit in regards to both androgens and also lipolytics. I won't go into too many details there. My parents, if they listen to this, would be absolutely mortified. But
we've all done some things, man. Even the smart ones have done some things. I was telling the crew the other day that I in my first ever prep, which I had a friend tell me, sort of guide my gear. I was at 120 mcg of T3.
Yeah, shit.
They're like, did you sleep? I was like, I was fine. Like, maybe, and it was Cytomel too.
You just don't know until you know.
Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah. So, but as I was saying, that the thing that I look back on that was most in hindsight, and it kind of shows the state I was in, to just like, this just must be what I have to do. Where I asked my coach at the time, why am I doing so much cardio? Like, what I was making the association, because Maddie Baker, who also works with George now and has done so for many years, we were prepped under the same coach at the same time for the same season. And we were kind of like even though we'd never met, we were dragging each other through, like, fuck, this sucks. I hate this coach, but let's just get it done. And he was doing less than me, still a ridiculous amount. And so I asked my coach, I was like, why am I doing 2 hours of Stairmaster? And why is it positioned at this time around my day? Like, if I'm going to do this, why isn't it? And he goes, because Jay Cutler did so. So you can do so as well. And I remember sitting there going, oh yeah, checks out. But that's the state I was in, like, oh, Jay Cutler did it. Then, I must be able to, it must work. Even at that time, if I was in some regular psychological state, I would have gone, what the fuck? But in hindsight, that's just plagued me over the years, that I didn't just say, I'm sorry, what the fuck are you talking about? But nonetheless, that kind of gives everyone a good context to that prep. And then 2 weeks out, as a result of what I would have been kind of, through doctors at the time, and through my own kind of hindsight through coaching and whatnot, I was just assuming would be just the most unequivocal elevation of allostatic load total. Like, just genuinely, there was nothing left to give, whereby the shoulder that was kind of already under a certain level of injury through footy, just repeated little niggles here and there. I pulled a dumbbell, 40 kilos out of a rack. And I always, as I've said in the podcast when we did it, that round table, it just felt like Mr. Potato Head holding something, and his body goes flying and the arm stays attached to whatever he grabbed. It just felt like my shoulder just came out. I didn't even pull the dumbbell out of the actual rack. I just went to actually, like, engage in the tension of pulling 35 kilos or whatnot out of the rack. And it was on the bottom, so I was having a little bit of a reach, and the shoulder comes out. I run to the bathroom. The pain just never. I tore my ACL, as I said, and nothing comes close to the dislocation pain I felt immediately. So I'm up, running into the wall, trying to get this back in. I do get that back in, but subsequently tear my labrum as a result, and basically unable to lift my arm above my head. So much so that I was so committed to getting on stage that I thought that I could get up there and hit single arm double biceps and whatnot and just have my arm in a sling. But I was told that was not to be the case, nor did the coach want to have that represent his business. So that was the end of that. That was the end of that prep. That was the end of that coaching. I think I just made the decision that once I kind of settled and the kind of systemic stress and, psychological stress was less, I was able to say, that was fucked. I never want to do that again. But I also was kind of plagued by the thought of, maybe that's how hard it just has to be. And because everybody talks about how hard it is and, and whatnot. And I just thought, maybe that's how hard it has to be. And I just wasn't capable. And I felt kind of a little bit fraudulent in that I had, said all of this stuff and done all of this stuff and kind of felt as if I, represented the ability to execute, but then couldn't see it through. Then kind of aligned myself with you in kind of mid 2020 and started engaging in those conversations, which was kind of like 5 to 6 months after that prep had finished, and I'd had enough time to get fat as shit. I think I just very much, as a result of the opposing views of that coach, really I think that's the best thing that came out of that prep and that experience. Was sometimes that experience is what you need to be able to understand where you need to go with regards to whether it's your own personality in coaching or what you align with. And I just aligned with what you were kind of verbalizing on social media and even kind of the personality of it. And we dived in at 20, just turned 21. And it's been, apart from that kind of 10 to 12 week block when I moved to Sydney and shit was just all over the place, it's been just continuous.
Yeah, dude. I mean, that's a journey. I mean, it certainly would have taught you what was possible, I guess you could say, for you, like what you were capable of, but also maybe, like what bad advice might be. But you don't really know what bad advice is, I guess, until you have like good advice, sat next to it, because you only know what you know. And that's the reality. And also there's some hindsight bias here too, man. Like a lot of people, I think, when they have phases like yours, are like, oh, if I should have done this. I'm like, yeah, but that's hindsight bias. You don't know when you're in the middle of it. You only know after the fact, because now you're being shown a different way,
Yeah, I think the only thing I look back on with regards to that and have some level of frustration in myself is that I at least did perceive myself through kind of 2016 to 2020 to have some relative education. I mean, I was coaching not athletes in regards to bodybuilding, but I was working through like Gen Pop coaching back then with like friends and family and kind of people in football and whatnot. And I knew to a certain extent that what I was doing, even with regards to pharmacology, like that's always probably been my biggest interest. And I was sitting in a history class in 2015 and 16, reading a lot of that. And then it was very divorced to what the education or at least understanding I had, but I still just thought, no, this is bodybuilding. So it must be different. It must just be this way. And it just wasn't. So that's probably the only part of frustration I have relative to hindsight. But nonetheless, I actually think that I definitely wouldn't have kind of sought any other services. And I wouldn't be probably where I am, not only with regards to myself as an athlete, but, the mentorship that you've kind of inadvertently given me over the years. So that's the best thing that came out of that, I think. And grateful for it, even though it sucked.
All right. So then let's fast forward. Obviously, we kicked off. There was always the intention to prep again, which we did. And we got to about 7 weeks out, was it?
Yes, 8 was the diagnosis, and 7 was kind of like me still again being like, we may be able to. I remember I went for a walk in the park after a day or two after I had been made aware of it, and I'm always like, there was even still that association to like, is this? I don't want to annoy him. Like he's busy. I'll tell him when it's my check-in. So I waited till then, and you just went for a walk in the park and sat down and obviously recorded that little WhatsApp or Loom or whatever it was. And I think I still was like, I don't know how bad it is. I don't know if it obviously wasn't as a result of anything that we were doing, for context for people listening. It was, extenuating circumstances, but, there was still that we didn't know if that was affecting it or making it worse. But I just thought, look, we're so close. This is the best I've ever got to. I already had those feelings in association to the previous prep not being able to be completed. This one felt completely divorced to that, albeit, hard in context, relative in context, but nothing like that was prior. So it felt like a very, very smooth prep for at least, as it was relative to myself, for the most part. And just we made, I guess, the conscious decision that because we were in the unknown to come out of that as a result of the diagnosis, which for anybody listening was just basically aortic stenosis from birth that was unaware of because I was born in a hospital in a country town that did not do or check those types of things, nor did I have that checked through when I had my knee reconstruction, which was relatively interesting. So essentially my entire athletic journey, sporting journey, through there, my heart was working about 50 to 60% capacity, which was an interesting understanding to find out, considering I'd always been relatively aerobically fit, or never felt any sort of dysregularity from a cardiac standpoint whatsoever. So yeah, it was extremely psychologically challenging.
So then, like, obviously, like that came about. You had to go in and get surgical intervention, which they did the little stitcheroo and fixed up that valve, which was very cool. I remember you coming out of that, man, and like us having conversations, and you're like, bro, I am out of breath walking 10 meters. Like, how is it that my heart is making me feel like this? So you come out of the bodybuilding identity, and now you're like literally a dude who just had fucking heart surgery at the age of what, 20? What were you then?
I would have been 24, 24, 25. Yeah, 2023. So 25. Yeah. I came out of that in the same way I went into it, trying to do too much too quickly, or trying to just get everything out of it I could. It was very much because I had the association to, and to give some context, I had been having some level of coaching success and business development and service development by that point. And where I felt fraudulent in myself in that first prep, not being able to kind of execute as I wanted, that compounded so significantly to the external, whereby I was, coaching and I could do this for these people, but then I wasn't able to be perceived to have executed that myself, and obviously out of my control and whatnot. But that compounded very, very, significantly for me. Like, this has happened twice now. At what level do people start to associate me as just like a really good quitter? Yeah, so I came out of that and immediately had like that competitive nature, purely probably driven by those feelings of like, I've got to just, challenge the normal timeline of this rate of progression or rate of recoverability. And I remember I sent you a voice message maybe like, oh, well, I was in the initial stay for 5 to 7 days. And then they were like, first 6 to 8 weeks, you're going to return to light activity. And I'm thinking light activity for me is like, let's go train some, 3 up in reserve, 4 up in reserve legs. So I'm like, light activity, I should be able to kind of go for walks. And to be honest, like, as stupid as that was, when I came out of within that initial 5 to 7 days, I couldn't speak. Like, I couldn't do my updates. I had to do written updates because they'd gone in, and what's supposed to be open heart surgery to a certain extent, that I chose for them to go in through the groin because I didn't want a fucking big, anesthetics cut down the middle of my chest. But I couldn't talk. Like, I genuinely couldn't formulate words the same way in which I had previously, because even that small correction to the biology of the heart just completely dysregulated my ability to kind of do and say and be, like, chewing and all of this stuff just felt like I knew what I was doing or how to do it, but I could not enact. Like, I'd say Dean, it'd be like deal. Like, what the fuck? Once I kind of accepted the realism of I'm not going to come back in 8 weeks, and it is going to be like a 6 to 12 month thing, just as the ACL was. It was like, okay, I've accepted this now. I don't know what this pertains for future relative to how I recover from this. I hope that it goes one way where I can be in the position I am as of now in reality. But if it doesn't, I can just be the best coach I can possibly be. I can still be involved in the industry.
Because that was mid 2023, or mid 2023, right? Yeah. And then it came to October 2024, which is when we kicked off again officially. But man, I remember, dude, I said this to Liz the other day, like, there's like 2 key moments for what's happened for you, which I vividly have associations with where I was and what I did. I don't know why, but like the first conversation of, hey, dude, I think it's probably the smartest for you to not continue with this prep. Health is kind of important. You're also only 24, so like, we'll be fine, And I was on the rooftop at WeWork in London. And I think there's an association with these things too, because you also are a traveler. So like, I know London was that moment. And the other one was walking around Tangier and Morocco, when we were like having a real good chat about you, like, hey man, I'm starting to actually get a little bit fitter. I'm going to entertain the idea of maybe you and I kicking things off again soon. And I was like, how it is, man, let's fucking just keep touching base and see how you go. And came to October and now here we are, mate, in September of 2025, and you're 12 days out, finally. We're at the stage now at 2 weeks out where for the last 2.5, 3 weeks, it's been a phase of progressively taking away your output and increasing your input, and you're losing weight and losing fat and tolerating food like never before. So
it is, I think it is, with regards to like my own expectation, as you said, I think that the best thing for myself with us kind of intermittently dieting since October was, I knew I wasn't going to have previous preps where I'd have to lose 20 kilos to be, I'm kind of hovering between like that, full 99-ish, flat 95, 96, whatever. And I started this prep at 107.5 officially at 18, 20 weeks out. Whereas
in October you were 109.
Yeah. And then previous, in our first prep, when I was like, when my first prep ever, the one that was not great. I think I was 103 and I got down to 83. And then actually, as I was doing more, I got all the way back up to like an 88 because of things that were being thrown in there that shouldn't be thrown in and stuff like that. But there was a big 20 kilo loss. And then in that second prep, I think I started maybe with you around like the 115s and got to about the 103, 102. And that was not as challenging, obviously, and nowhere comparable, but still challenging in and of itself. Whereas this time we started at 107. I'm now, 10, 9, 8, 7, however many kilograms down. And that has contributed so significantly to my confidence, knowing like I'm starting better than I probably ever finished, first and foremost. So it genuinely has felt like to me, maybe apart from the first 2 weeks of this prep, that every single week has been the best I've ever been. And for me, I was like, I still have the expectation that I want to be peeled, more so to represent Flex success in how I deem them to be, the standard that you have for all the athletes and the standard that you uphold through your practices. But I didn't want to be the anomaly for Flex. Like Dean gets everybody peeled and Taylor's still a fat piece of shit that's 8 weeks out, So there was that. But in terms of my own expectation, I'm like, even if I am not representative of that standard, I'm still my best. So I'm happy. But it also has allowed me with regards to not having to just have the cognitive decline that I had in previous preps, because there hasn't had to be that 20 kilo shift. And I feel as if with regards to, and you knew this was something for me that was a pretty big deal, if I negated the potential or, the success of my athletes this season, which is the biggest season I've had coaching wise, which just happened to be the case, of course. If I negated that, I felt like it was almost perhaps a performance suicide, whereby people would be like, wow, this guy just cared about himself and nobody else. And I just didn't want that to be any chance of happening. And through the process, because of how you've programmed it, because of how we periodize things, because of giving extra time for that performance anxiety, I feel like I've only been a better coach, more intelligent, more efficient, because I am having to be so involved in my own process and my own efficiency of time. And it's never, I'm almost like, I don't want to get out of it in 4 weeks time or however long. Like I want to kind of summon this level of efficiency.
Mate,
all the time.
Honestly, dude, that is the fucking, I mean, outside of if you felt super restricted, then I would change my opinion on this. But like to lean into like Kuba, Kuba said to me in this prep, dude, I'm a bit annoyed. This prep like has felt too easy. I feel like I can't be in as good a shape as that I am and at the weight that I am because I feel as good as I do. And I don't feel good about feeling good. And then he's like, but like we'll get out of this. I'm going to use, but it's all the prep. Like I've been prepping every day for the last however many years. Like nothing's changed. We've just eaten less food. So like, of course I feel good because we've controlled for output. Of course I feel good because we've controlled for input, like et cetera, right? So I think unless you feel restricted, which he doesn't, then you shouldn't get out of the prep mindset when you finish.
Yeah.
Especially if it serves you well. And there's certainly an argument for like there being a degree of like time laxity driving more inefficiency. Like the more time you have free, the more time you have to do nothing. But the less time you have free, the more efficient you have to be with everything that is like really important to you. So like you don't want to be like going so far that you never have any minutes in the day left to yourself. But prep, everyone talks about this, man, and I think people just quickly forget it that there's always a sweet spot in prep, and then there's a shit spot, and then there's another sweet spot. And too many people forget about the sweet spots, So.
All right, everyone, that's all of the chat we're going to show you today. Remember that if you wanted to see footage of Taylor on stage, you can do that by going to our YouTube channel, finding the heart surgery to stage backstage video, and scrolling to the point in the timestamps where Taylor gets on stage. You can see his results. You can see the rig that he put up. Very impressive. Now we're just going to head into some audio of a portion of Dean's check-in to Taylor after the show. Some things they have planned for the future, some phases that they've penciled out, and then we're going to wrap up the episode. So thanks again. If you like this episode, don't forget to like, subscribe, share with your friends, and give us a great review.
Obviously a very successful season, mate. The season that we finally made it to. And it came to, full fruition in the end. I was super happy with the condition. I was really happy with the presentation. Exceptionally happy just with the balance and the way you conducted yourself, man. So mad props to you. Which brings us to this fun phase, mate, which is, for you going to be largely centered around just ensuring that all of your health markers are back in play. You've got a busy few months coming up. We're now, 2-3 days post-comp, and you're up 2 or 3 kilos, which is to be expected. A little bit of food freedom there available to you, although you aren't somebody who typically dives in head first on that. Like as you mentioned here, you really just had some sushi and chilled out with the family. So with the calorie allocation you gave that, more than appropriate. I'm super happy with that. I'm very happy with the look, man. Like I think for you coming through this recovery phase, which is largely going to be, centered around, like I said, like ensuring not necessarily restoring, because I don't think we need to restore health markers because I don't expect them to be skewed, but ensuring that health markers are nailed by the time that you sort of finish this phase from a coaching perspective with all of the comps you've got coming up with. We've got the IPB Nationals, you've got the ICN show, you've got travel to Japan for fun, which we want to make sure that at least the hunger signaling is like really shut down by then, so that you can go there and like feel relatively like at peace with being hungry, but not like ravenous, because hunger is going to exist in the absence of returning to homeostatic body fat levels. And as we've spoken about on our call the other day, we don't really have the intention of getting you back to that previous set point, which I think we established actually pretty well before we kicked into this prep, to be fair. Like your tolerance to low calorie dieting, your tolerance to low body fat is exceptional to the point where it hasn't impeded your ability to be a coach, but rather maybe even enhanced it. So certainly not going to be pushing you back up to that sort of sluggish, heavier 120 plus range again. I think for this recovery phase, which I'll talk to you about in a second on the periodization plan, will be like circa 100 kilos. I think for you is going to be the right number between now and then kicking off your growth phase. In an ideal world, I'd love to like have you like hit like a really chill 4-week, maybe 6-week recovery phase here, where it's like really just centered around like preparing your body for a growth phase and a nice little rebound. But with your commitments coming up and then the travel and basically not really being stable in location, but also even just your ability to, have complete stability in food and complete stability in availability of pharmacology until like what we were talking about in November, your phase here is going to be extended. So, physique though, fantastic, man. Like I said, a little bit of fluid on the physique, a little bit of fluid sitting beneath the skin there, or up a few kilos, a bit of fluid in the face, but nothing here that isn't going to like essentially just find its way out of the cell by the time you find stability again in food now, because you've had a bit of variability in the last few days. So first one to call, physique, super happy, man. Just be mindful of not over consuming on fluids at the moment. We don't want to drive like any kind of like, electrolyte imbalance to the point where you actually then run flat. So if you're noticing like any pumps dip off in the gym, you should be noticing pumps tick up at the moment with, an escalation in glycogen saturation, with an escalation in even maybe sodium with a few of the different foods. We should actually see that fullness come up, and we should see pumps come up. If they don't, then it may be because you're over consuming fluids to the point where you're then driving diuresis so hard that you're running low on sodium. So just be mindful of that too. The fewer the swings, or the smaller the swing that we can get between those, the day-to-day nutrition, the better off we're going to be. So my man, let me pull this up, talk you through the periodization plan here, and then we will get into what we're going to get done this week, followed by the weeks to come. So we are up here, week number 1 of recovery. First phase here is like a 6-week really centered phase on, a really focused phase, sorry, I should say, on health. So you've got a heap of travel coming up. So we're going to like pull PDs down to the bare minimum dosage. I'm going to bring you down to like legitimate TRT, not fucking sports TRT, but legitimate TRT. Situate is like a really nice range. Although we haven't used a significant degree of farm in the previous 6 to 12 months, to be perfectly honest, relatively speaking, we have been on an extended escalation phase in that, to throw some arbitrary numbers at it. If somebody was using like the maximum tolerance that they could afford on AAS, and they could do that for 4 months, and then they would have like a 2 to 3 month break or whatever it may be, then they go back to it. We've never really taken you up to maximum tolerance, but we've kept you at moderate tolerance for a period of time, and then back down to like a moderate, like sort of de-escalation, I guess you could say, not to like a full TRT. So you've had an extended period of escalation here that we need to account for. So week 1 through 6 down to legitimate TRT. Within that, man, I expect that we'll probably be pulling out T3 at around about week 5. I want to give you about 4 weeks to find the appropriate surplus at the moment to put on, that 2 to 3 kilos above what you've got on now, minus fluid. So call it 97 kilos flat. We're coming in around peak week at around 95.5. So if we can put on that first 2 to 3 kilos just to sort of resaturate cells, and then look to like gain probably about a half a kilo a week, that'll get us into the circa like target range of about 99 to 100 kilos by end of October, or nearly end of October. Last week of October is the goal. So basically got 5 weeks here to put on 2.5 kilos, half a kilo a week, stable escalation. It'll mean about a 500 calorie surplus per day until we get there. And then I'll be pretty happy from there to then run to maintenance. At that point, we will have already pulled out T3. It'll give us the opportunity to sort of like let that HPTA kick back in. And then I'll be allocating blood work for around about mid-November, just before you leave for Japan, so we can ensure that those markers are coming back into range where we'd expect them to be by the time we start to travel. Within that, I'm just going to say to you, man, that you can train for fun for as long as you would like. What I mean by that is no specific programming for this point, because the biggest focus for your training is going to be kicking off in December when you land in the UK. However, I know that you're also somebody who likes to follow a program, so I know you will anyway. But we could maybe have a discussion around whether or not we do this as movement pattern-based set targets. For example, 4 sets of hinging, 4 sets of chest press, whatever it may be, or horizontal pressing versus horizontal like sort of actual flexion, like a chest fly. Or you could train for fun while you've got the opportunity to train with clients and whatnot through till probably nationals, which will be the end of this month. I think then once you get out of that, probably around about that sort of mid-October point, like 4 weeks from now, might be the time to actually get back into an actual program. So I'll just put this in here. So that program from around about then, also possibly some formal cardio back in just to make sure cardiorespiratory and cardiovascular health is good. And then we'll be basically in a holding pattern from end of October through to the end of November, stabilizing weight, making sure everything is good. Possible opportunity for a slight escalation in pharmacology then, just to make sure that we're not losing any tissue that you've earned in the previous 12 months of effort, so that we then don't have to catch that back in the first few weeks of the growth phase, but rather we'll start at like homeostatic muscle amount, and then body fat will be in a great spot and you'll be like really ready to rock and roll. So the goal is by end of October, we'll have your maintenance calories, basically rinse, repeat until you're ready and stable to go. So that is the plan, man. And then you'll have like around about a 3 to 4 month block between UK and Europe to like really dig in and get some growth done. So I'm super looking forward to doing that, mate. With that being said, dude, here is the approach I want to take for this week. If you could check in for me again on Friday, so like 4 days from now, just to make sure the weight is trending appropriately, that would be awesome. Cardio, no formal cardio for now. Around about 4 weeks from now, we'll kick that back in. Daily steps, it's just stuck at 12,000. Pretty natural for you. No need for us to go and do any more or any less. PEDs, we're going to shift that to down to 200 megs for tests. And we'll keep thyroid stable for now. We'll keep growth hormone stable for now. And then we'll move out any other androgens that are in there. So all of the androgens, any orals that are in, they're all out. The only thing you're going to be using at the moment is injectable testosterone, thyroid medication, all your ancillaries, and then your growth hormones stabilized there for PM. I'll fix these numbers up for you so that they are alongside that now. So as I mentioned, we are looking at 200 for that bad boy. This is stable, and then this can be stable at 4 as well. Pre-bed, sub-Q, good to go. Nutrition-wise, I know I said to you the other day that you were going to do roughly 250. I think it was 260 protein, something like that. I think it was 265. But I want to shift it up a little bit just to sort of help with appetite control. So I'm going to shift protein up to 300 grams, so about 3 grams per kilo. Carbs at 400, fats at 60. Technically, there's a greater advantage from a metabolic health perspective to do more carbohydrate than there is protein, but historically it's a little bit better from a satiety perspective. So do that for me, please. Ideally 4 meals, separated by a few hours if you can, but whatever is best for you from a satiety and appetite control perspective at the moment is probably the best approach to take with your nutrition. But given the protein is so high, it will probably afford you to do like a protein veg meal as a singular meal, and then you could do your other like normal meals on top of that that you were doing baseline, basically pre-prep, because it's pretty similar numbers to the pre-prep numbers. Pre-prep numbers were like 290 protein, 425 carb, and 55 fat. So we're pretty similar, 3,400 calories. Now within this, man, I've just got some notes in here about like expectations around dietary flexibility. This is the sort of ideal scenario: minimum effective doses on fruits and vegetables. I know you'll hit those because you're not an asshole. But I've just got in here like, up to 2 per week meals out with accurate guesstimation. For 6 days of the week, I would expect no more than that within that 2. And if you wanted to have some variability, I'm okay with one of those 6 days being a protein and calorie target, but tracked accurately. The other 5 days would be protein, carbohydrate, fat targets within 5 grams. And then 1 day per week, if you feel up to it, then you can have a flexible approach to that one where you just allocate yourself an appropriate amount of calories. And all I would say is prior to going out, my expectation is that you would hit your minimum effective fruit, your minimum effective non-starch veggies, and at least 200 grams or 2 grams per kilogram of body weight in protein before you go out, so that you at least mark off and tick the box for all of the minimum stuff. And then, like I said, an appropriate allocation of calories for that free meal. So somewhere in this vicinity is going to be like, 1,000, 1,500. But mate, that's it from me. Check in for me on Friday, please. Once again, bro, congratulations on an epic season. On to the next one, eh? Cheers, bro.